And welcome on in to the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamud here with you, along with Zach Malamud. Zach, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Brett. Obviously, we had a big draft over the weekend. Very happy with how things went, and we're now into redraft season. You and I, Brett, after our dynasty drafts are now over for the year.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting breaking down redraft after going pretty dynasty, I would say, over the last month. A lot of prep that we did, both of us. You had two drafts, one in a one quarterback, one in a super flex, and simply in the super flex. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Give us a thumbs up. Go check out a lot of our rookie breakdowns that we've been doing over the last couple of weeks, as well as a lot of the division previews that we've been doing. Check those episodes out, and we're going to start to get into redraft season, as Zach alluded to, in the next couple of weeks, giving you draft tips, all the insight, sleepers, things like that, that you can follow along with us and hopefully get some good tips. So, Zach, without further ado, let's break down this big board here that we had over the weekend. Superflex format, so should be noted. We won't give you a look at the full league, but we will give you a look afterwards at our teams, and we'll sort of break them down. But Zach, let's start out at round one, top of the board, Marvin Harrison Jr. And, listen, there was a little bit of debate whether it should be Caleb or Marvin. I think that you and I have kind of come to the consensus that Marvin was the right pick there.
Yeah, definitely. And for a team that had two quarterbacks already, two starting quarterbacks in a dynasty league and obviously a super flex league, I think you look at this draft pick in Marvin Harrison, it was either going to be Marvin or Caleb. A need at wide receiver as well. Marvin, definitely the right pick here.
Yeah, moving along, it made number two pretty easy. Caleb Williams is the pick there. Obviously, quarterback needy team, only had one quarterback on the roster over the age of 35. And so sort of the right move there to take Caleb over Jaden Daniels. Third pick, obviously the debate begins again. Do you take the wide receiver or do you take the quarterback? Doug and Jay, they are going with the quarterback. And I think it's the right pick, even with Josh Allen on their roster.
Yeah, definitely, Brett. I think the big thing for them was they had a ton of wide receivers, number one. And number two, in a super flex league, you obviously would give the advantage to quarterbacks in any chance you could possibly get. I think that really shows in this pick as well, because of the need at quarterback in super flex leagues. You grab Jaden Daniels. That you can kind of flip-flop between him and Neighbors. I think Daniels for them was the right pick.
Yeah, so moving right along, Zach, you kind of alluded to it in the last episode, but, I'm going to ask you to repeat it here. You were over there, pick number 4, and you weren't really infatuated with any of the quarterbacks, and it doesn't look like the league really was. As you see, they sort of fell to the back of the first round. But Zach, just break down why you traded out from 4.
Yeah, obviously my team was very in need of a second quarterback. I had Justin Herbert as my number 1. I had Justin Fields as my number 2. Obviously, a question mark of when he will play, but he's right now behind Russell Wilson on the depth chart in Pittsburgh. Needed a quarterback. Aaron Rodgers was available through a trade, and I felt like it was worth giving up the 4th pick for something that was so valuable to my team in a second quarterback. I needed to move back for it. And in the end, it was the right play for me.
Yeah. And so, I had the opportunity to move up, obviously trade a third quarterback, and, a depth piece for me was Jordan Addison, but a young and should be very good wide receiver to come. Replace him with another wide receiver. It's Malik Neighbors. I think this guy has talent to potentially, unseat Marvin as the top receiver. And we talk about Rome Odunze as well. Both of those guys, I think, really, it gets kind of close. I think that from the get-go, we're going to see Marvin be the top scorer this year. But the talent of those 3 guys, I think, really has shined through. That goes right into that next pick, Rome Odunze. I don't know that there was any debate. I want to jump to the following pick. Jonathan Brooks goes to Jared. He had 3 picks, and obviously he picked Caleb Williams with the second pick. He had 6 and 8. He goes Jonathan Brooks here. Zach, let's hear the breakdown on Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, and Brett, I mean, he did tell us before the draft that he was going to surprise some people, and he was not wrong. He definitely did. A team that needed quarterbacks heading into this year, had Kirk Cousins already, drafted Caleb, so he got his number 2 quarterback. It was a question if he was going to get his number 3 in a young guy, but just didn't believe in the quarterbacks in the end. Takes Brooks. I mean, that's the top running back off the board. I think when you look at Brooks, yeah, the upside is definitely there down in a system in Carolina where, I mean, it's a new everything, new coordinator, new coach. They have a new offense, basically. So for that reason, you could say, yeah, the upside is there for Brooks. However, I don't know if the upside is there for Brooks just this season because he's coming off that torn ACL. Obviously, on the PUP list right now, Brett. I think when you look at that, you say, all right, probably you're focusing on that second half of the season for this year. But I mean, for the future, I mean, this guy sat behind Bijan Robinson and was still very, very productive down in Texas. So I think when you look at that, you say, all right, the talent's definitely there. It's just about staying on the field now. And you really can't go wrong. Although maybe it was a little early in a Superflex league. I mean, you get the top running back and you definitely can't go wrong there.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, it was sort of a go-get guy thing. Yes, you could have debated whether he takes him at 6 or at 8, but if that's the guy he really wants, you don't really risk that. You go up and get that guy. Could be a really good asset for him moving forward. Following pick, Xavier Worthy, and we sort of thought that might have been the 6th pick. It ends up being the 7th pick. Brian Thomas Jr. goes at 8, and then it follows up with Brock Bowers, and it sort of was a little bit of maneuvering in our draft. Freddie trading back twice and still being able to pick up a quarterback, but Brock Bowers, Doug and Jared trading up to go get him. Zach, just break down what you think he can be, even with Dalton Kincaid on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, Brett, this guy, I drafted him in my 1 quarterback league. I have him behind Mark Andrews in that league, in that Dynasty league. And even though I had Mark Andrews, you go out and you get a talent like Brock Bowers because, I mean, you're a big fan of watching Hard Knocks this year. You said that Nick Saban was on the phone. 2 guys were the problem for his team, Alabama. In his eyes, it was Malik Neighbors and Brock Bowers, 2 of those guys in the first round here. And I mean, Brock Bowers is going 10 in this draft, and you could have an argument that that's even a little bit late. I mean, there's the argument there because of the talent that he brings. What a player coming out of Georgia. And I mean, a tight end that could really sit there for a long, long time and be productive every single season. So they got their guy in the end. Even though they have a player like Kincaid, you can never have enough great players. When you see the upside, you get the elite guys. You've said that plenty of times. You get the elite guys rather than guys you maybe think are good this year or next year. I mean, Brock Bowers, I think career long has the chance to be one of the greats at tight end.
So we move along in the first round to the back end. It is great quarterbacks to end it. Again, it's a super flex, so it was a little bit surprising to see these 3 guys go at the very end. But Bo Nix goes ahead of Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. Again, it seemed like it was a go-get-your-guy thing. Scott jumps up, grabs Bo Nix, followed by Drake May, who I think probably has the smartest IQ. And, yeah, you alluded to the Hard Knocks. I've been watching a lot of, the Giants breaking on Drake May, potentially trading up to 3, and how close did it actually get? Didn't really hear a lot about J.J. McCarthy on there. So it sort of was like, yeah, he was there. But really, we saw Drake May sitting in front of the whiteboard, breaking down plays, recalling plays. The smarts is really, really up there. And so I think it's a good pick. It might not pay off immediately. But, if it goes to a team, non-quarterback needy team, I think having Drake May sitting there as your developmental 3rd quarterback is a pretty good move.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. And just quickly on Bo Nix, and I mean, I've talked about Bo Nix in our previous episodes that I'm a little worried on the system that's around him, and we've seen Sean Payton in plenty of years make something out of absolutely nothing in an offense. So I think Scott's really hoping for that this year. And maybe Bo Nix is the starter. Maybe they bench him for a couple games and let him learn. But right now, I do think he is going to be the starter versus May and McCarthy. Still a question if they are going to start for their respective teams. So getting the starting quarterback, I think, was a priority there.
Yeah, and it makes sense for a team that finished in second place last year, to go get a guy who potentially could be an impact player for you this year. So Drake May goes, then JJ McCarthy goes, and that wraps up the first round. We start out in the second round, and it was Keon Coleman who went, and it was a little bit surprising to see him fall out of the first round, but listen, value was there. So being able to take him, and then you were on the clock right after that, and you took Michael Penix.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's listened to this podcast, they know how much I believe in Michael Penix. I'm one of his biggest fans here, especially in fantasy, which I think yes, you can say, oh well, he's gonna sit down a couple years. I mean, it could be a year, it could be 3 weeks, it could be 2 years. The talent is there, and I see talent, and I went and grabbed it, Brett. Obviously a second round pick in a super flex, and you still get a quarterback. I'm very happy with that in the end. And my team definitely needs quarterbacks for the future. So I went out and kind of got my guy. I'm a huge believer in him, and the fact that he fell to me in the second round, I with open arms, I was able to grab him, and I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, obviously the draft capital that Michael Penix had, I think that, within a couple of years, we'll see him at least hit the field if we don't see him have at least a package or something like that this year. Moving right along, Trey Benson ends up being the next pick. Again, second running back off the board, good value there. Ladd McConkey slipped to the fourth pick of the second round. Big surprise there, Zach.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a guy that I had on my radar. It was either him or Penix that I was deciding between. I went with the quarterback, with my need at quarterback. But I mean, Ladd McConkey dropping to 16, Brett, was probably one of the most surprising things I saw all day in this draft. I thought he was a first round pick. Obviously, you see a couple names up there that go ahead of him in Brian Thomas and even Keon Coleman, the first player out in the second round. I feel like Ladd McConkey, though, in this offense with Justin Herbert, some people have the argument that he's not the number one. I think he is, based on their offense and a short yardage kind of player, maybe even a screen kind of player. He really is a big time player in that Michigan type offense where it could be short yardage. And I think he could have a really good year. That could be a big time steal there at 16, Brett.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, just the value of him at 16, it allowed him to basically sell for the running back earlier that he took with Jonathan Brooks and still ended up getting a very good wide. Moving right along, 4 of the next 6 picks went to Will, and he really cashed in on trying to build out a skill position group here, as he basically took Roma Dunze in the first round, and so he followed that up with Blake Corum and Jalen Wright, and then he got Ricky Purcell and Ben Sanat. So 2 running backs, 2 guys, and a tight end. That's a pretty good way to follow up there.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. And we did talk about a guy like Blake Corum going a bit earlier than people thought at the beginning. I've started listening to redrafts and looking at them and really analyzing them. Blake Corum is the ultimate handcuff. And I am a Kyron Williams owner in this exact league. And I mean, Blake Corum is a guy to go out and get if you do have Kyron Williams. It just shows that the value that he has, that he's going ahead of some of those wide receivers and other running backs and even a couple tight ends. Like, he has the ultimate value that if Kyron Williams for some reason goes down, Blake Corum is right there in line for RB1, RB2 production. He's right there for it. And in that Sean McVay offense, he definitely will get some involvement.
So we went Blake Corum and Jalen Wright. In between the Ricky Purcell pick was Adonai Mitchell, which obviously we've talked about him at length and the opportunity for him to take over as long as the effort is there, which sort of was his knock during the combine, sort of, dropped his draft stock a bit. Then Purcell, then Malachi Corley goes. And Zach, you and I have also talked at length about Malachi Corley and how, the opportunity for him to just get the ball and streak down the field and get open in space and make a play out of pretty much nothing. Kind of makes this pick right there a good one, even at the back half of the second round.
Yeah, it's a good pick. You're going with upside here. Obviously, you kind of see some names that went behind Corley in that late second, early third. But I mean, kind of getting your guy. Obviously, we're in New York, so there's Jet fans in this league. And Corley, obviously, the rookie for the Jets is he has the opportunity to be something, and they got their guy in the late second round. It's a solid pick here with the upside that he has.
Yeah, and it should be noted that Mike Williams currently is on the PUP list, and we'll see if he gets to open up the season and what that looks like. And Malachi Corley getting some pretty valuable reps, I think, right now with Aaron Rodgers. We saw a couple good plays over the last few days here in training camp. Moving along, Ben Sinnott goes, and then it's Jermaine Burton, followed by Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd, to me, was one of those potential sleeper in the draft. We talked a few weeks ago about the potential that Josh Jacobs doesn't have a contract in a few years, and it said 4-year deal when it came out, but really sort of this out clause after 1 year or 2 years. And so Marshawn Lloyd there in the back half of the second round, I think, could potentially be a big sleeper.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously Jack, a Packer fan, went out and got the Packer there. And that's great value at the end of the second round for, you said it, a guy who can really just step in if for some reason Jacobs cannot go or is injured or even a contract dispute. Marshawn Lloyd is right there behind him. The talent that he has coming out of USC, one of his best years ever. And maybe it could be the best year, of his career, what he was able to do at USC a season ago. Marshawn Lloyd at the end of the second round, a great pick there.
So streaking right along into the third round, Braylon Allen and Xavier Legette, they go back-to-back to Jenna. Legette was kind of an interesting one, a first-round pick who slipped out of the second round, first and second round in our draft. Great value there. Jatavian Sanders is followed up, potentially could be that number 2 tight end coming out of the class. Polk goes right after him, followed by Wilson. And then it was me who took Jalen McMillan. Zach, for me, it's really just about the opportunity. He'll be on the field pretty early in his career. And I just think that there's the opportunity that he overtakes Godwin as the number 2. And that's sort of what led to my pick. Obviously, we saw the talent that he had at Washington. He was playing with Michael Penix. He was playing alongside Rome Odunze. And a lot of the stats that he had actually were better than Odunze. And so to me, I was like, okay, let's take the opportunity that he goes off. Didn't have a need wide receiver, but the value was there. And so I just sort of went best player available. Moving along, Kamani Vidal goes next, followed by Tez Walker, Luke McCaffrey, and then you took Ray Davis, Zach. Just break down, what led you to that pick.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of see all the guys that went off the board right before, and a lot of value there in Legette, as well as Roman Wilson, Jalen McMillan, even Jalen Polk. Guys that dropped into the third round that you could expect to go in the second round of a lot of rookie drafts. And I mean, that led me to Ray Davis, who also was one of the guys that dropped and kind of just fell in my lap. Obviously, in Buffalo right now, it's kind of a question mark who the guy is behind James Cook. And I know you, a James Cook owner, was looking at this guy because it could end up being, if James Cook can't go or they're kind of trying to limit his goal line touches. Ray Davis did a phenomenal job at Kentucky all 4 years of college and a real menace on the goal line, I think he could have an impact in Buffalo, where the options are kind of lurking. We're really trying to figure out who's going to be the top guys there. Could it be a couple running backs, who the wide receiver is? Right now, all we know is, I believe that Dalton Kincaid is just the top guy overall for Buffalo this season, and seeing what he can do as a pass catcher. But Ray Davis dropped to me, and I think the value there as a handcuff for James Cook is big time for Davis.
Yeah, I just think when you look at Latavius Murray and the role that was there last year for him, they really wanted somebody who can pound the ball in. They didn't really use James Cook within the 20-yard line. We talked about that at length last year, and this will allow them to kind of have another guy there with Cook. So, yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I was picking just a few picks later, and I was looking at Ray Davis potentially falling to me. You outsmart me and get him there. Moving along, Bucky Irving, followed by Noah Fant, and then I was on the clock. I took Theo Johnson. This is an opportunity for a kid who's coming in after Waller's retirement. Obviously, we have Daniel Bellinger, who's technically the starter right now, but Theo Johnson's been getting a lot of the reps with the ones, and I think that's really important in just the first few days of camp, that he's sticking around with the ones. And so, potential opportunity, and otherwise we off the waiver wire for him. But I just think to take a chance on a Daniel Jones receiver who is a tight end, I think that was sort of worth it. Obviously, I have Malik Neighbors, who's going to get fed. We saw Waller get fed last year for when he was healthy and on the field. Potential that happens here. Moving along, Rasheen Ali, and then it was you with two straight picks, Zach. Break down Troy Franklin and Jordan Travis.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Troy Franklin, I have no clue what he's doing in the fourth round, Brett. I looked at my sheet like a couple of times. I was like, is he really still available? Troy Franklin, who, I mean, everybody has made a lot of noise about, he's going to play with his quarterback, Bo Nix. I mean, a guy in most rookie drafts that's going mid to late second, maybe even early third. I got him in the fourth round, and he fell into my lap. I said, thank you very much. I had another depth piece at wide receiver, and a lot of people doubted him. I won't. I'll stick with him, and we'll see where it goes. Obviously, going in the fourth round, it's a flyer, and I'll take that flyer for a guy who's playing with his college quarterback, and a question where he's gonna place on the depth chart. But what I do know is he's played with Bo Nix before. He knows how Bo Nix operates, and that's a positive heading in, especially in a dynasty league where it could end up being a long time where Bo Nix and Troy Franklin have this chemistry as a quarterback and wide receiver duo. Next, Brett, I'll talk about Jordan Travis, who, when I looked at it last year and that leg injury, I really said, darn, I thought he was going to be a really high prospect in this upcoming draft. And this draft, obviously that injury really put him down draft boards and kind of puts him under the radar. But the talent that I saw in college from him at Florida State, I mean, this Florida State team should have been in the CFB playoff. Obviously the argument was there, but they said, they don't have a quarterback. Yeah, the quarterback was injured. That guy was Jordan Travis, who led them all the way to a great season before he got hurt. I'll take a shot on him, especially because I have Aaron Rodgers. Yes, there's some guys in between them. Tyrod Taylor's there. But I look at Jordan Travis and what he was able to do in college. I'll keep him on my roster, see where it goes. But good value there for a quarterback in the fourth round.
Yeah, I agree with both of those picks. Obviously, Troy Franklin, it was very shocking for me to see him there in the fourth round also. It really just came down to I had way too many wides to consider even taking him. But, kudos to you on taking him there. Jordan Travis is an interesting one because, yeah, like you said, he was a really high prospect. Aaron Rodgers is getting up there in age. Tyrod Taylor, battled the injury. So, yeah, I like the pick. I think that, using him as a project, potentially just a stash on the end of your bench, made sense there. A guy who I was a little bit surprised about that was also still there was Javon Baker, who I took with the following pick. This is a guy who, quite frankly, could beat out Polk as that top receiver in New England. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be right yet. Obviously, we have Drake May. Mac Jones is on his way out. Shout out to Mac Jones. And so Drake May comes in, and basically, we'll see if it's him or if it's Jacoby Brissett. But I think that Javon Baker so far in camp is impressing a lot of people, impressing the Patriots social media staff at least, because it's been a ton of Baker clips and that he's cooking and things like that. Listen, this is a guy who is very talented, has the opportunity to be a target monster. And it's sort of in a world where, he's in a room right now where there's like 7 guys I think we named last week when we talked about them again. Somebody's going to have to come out of this. He only went a couple rounds after Polk. I think Polk will get some of the early looks, but Baker could end up emerging here as the 1, if not the 2. Moving right along, and what I thought was a really smart pick was the following pick, Khalil Shakir, who I think has the opportunity to do the exact same thing I just said about Baker, which is take over. It's a familiar face with Josh Allen, and he adds himself into a room where Keon Coleman's there, Curtis Samuel is there, both new faces, little bit of familiarity, Josh Allen.
Yeah, 100%. And take the upside of a wide receiver who goes under the radar. I mean, you talk about Keon Coleman and guys like Curtis Samuel also there. And I even mentioned Kincaid getting targets this year. Khalil Shakir is the only one besides Dalton Kincaid that knows this quarterback and has played with Josh Allen. So, I mean, building on that chemistry, we talk about that a lot when it comes to those teams that need to find that number 1 wide receiver. Khalil Shakir has a better chance than anybody in my mind because of that chemistry that he already has with Josh Allen, Brett.
Yeah, and so really smart value there. The following pick, Tyrone Tracy Jr., which I also thought was a smart pick. Again, it's all about opportunity, especially when you hit that back half of the 3rd round into the 4th and 5th rounds in these sort of drafts. The opportunity to take over Saquon, and obviously we'll see what happens. It's really not I would say that when it comes to running backs, the draft capital doesn't exactly matter. It sort of just comes down to the talent, the hot hand, and you sort of combine that into becoming the 1. We've seen guys who are just off the street who go right in there. Keeping right along here, Joe Milton's the following pick, followed by Greg Dortch, Cade Stover, Will Shipley, and then Elijah Mitchell went at the back half of the 4th round to Christian McCaffrey owner.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about those handcuffs, Brett. Every single year, the most important thing in my mind going into redraft is in the late rounds, I'm grabbing that handcuff. And some people may not see that. They say, oh, well, the value of another guy could be higher. In those late rounds, you got to grab those handcuffs because I don't think there's anybody better. And those guys have the upside to be really, really strong. Eli Mitchell has always been the second guy behind McCaffrey since he got to San Fran. And why not grab him, get that insurance piece in case something happens to McCaffrey? Obviously, a guy who went through injuries early in his career in 2 straight seasons where he stayed healthy, hoping to keep that going. But if something happens, then Eli Mitchell is right there.
All right, so now we hit the 5th round, and it's sort of like throwing a dart at a wall, and you're kind of just trying to hope that somebody relevant pop down, somebody might make an impact. Our draft obviously includes waivers, and so this is usually the round where you see some of those waiver pickups happen in there, and there were plenty of it. We start out with Isaiah Davis, followed by Michael Pratt. Jacoby Brissett was that 3rd pick of the 5th round, a guy who potentially could end up as a week 1 starter. And so I think it was a really good opportunity to take a chance, especially in a super flex league where you can get a starter. And that's sort of the name of the game, is having the most starters. Potentially can use it as a trade chip later if you don't need him. But just having that guy on your roster, I think, is pretty important.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. And a kind of a steal here in the 5th round where nobody's really thinking too much about it. Jacoby Brissett could end up being the starter. Like you said, they could say, all right, Drake May needs a little bit of time and to learn under a experienced quarterback. And I think Brissett could play a couple games. We'll see how it goes as we're in training camp right now and we start to get into preseason. We'll really see who's going to be the quarterback in New England. But a good pick there in the 5th.
So then you had the following pick. You go and you pick a defense here, which was a little bit interesting, but I think it was a pretty good unit.
Yeah, I mean, it's an upgrade, Brett, because I had the Patriots as well as the Saints, two teams that, I mean, the Patriots have not been really the same kind of defense as we're used to in all those Super Bowl teams. And when Brady was there, they were really relying on that defense in certain cases. That's really dropped. And as far as the Saints, Sean Payton's out the door. They have Dennis Allen in there, but this defense is not as strong as it was. And I mean, I'm looking at a team in the Eagles where they have grabbed a ton of guys, whether that's through free agency or through the draft. They've really pieced up this defense, whereas last year it was very weak and they really struggled. This year, I mean, they've added a ton of guys. So I'm looking at this team saying, yeah, they're clearly going to be my top team. Why not take a chance on them and grab an upgrade down in the 5th round where, I mean, we're saying it, there's not much there, Brett.
Yeah, listen, I think that defenses, especially the last 2 seasons, have really made a big difference here. I think that, you know, a lot of the pick sixes and touchdowns scored, things like that, have allowed there to be a little more of a disparity between the top and the bottom, where it used to sort of just everybody was kind of really close. It didn't really matter what defense you had. Now I think that, you know, looking at some of these teams, like they're 8 points off in points per game, that could be the make or break between you winning and losing a game, especially in a lot of these tight matchups. So I thought it was a really smart pick there. I go with Audric Estime, the next one. And again, it was throwing the dart at the wall, that potential opportunity. We're hearing a lot of rumblings about what the future holds of that running back room in Denver, Javonte, and, you know, you're Javonte owner. So we've spoken at length about that. But now we're hearing rumblings of, like, is he going to get the work? Is he going to get cut? Like, are they going to trade him somewhere? And so, you know, to just basically take a flyer on a guy, Audric Estime, love the talent. He's not the fastest guy, but he's a little shifty and he can kind of mow you over. And so it was a good idea for me just to kind of say, okay, let's get a non-wide receiver and take a flyer. And so that's where I went with there. Johnny Wilson, the next pick, followed by Sam Hartman. Aeneas Smith, he goes following after that. And then it was Hunter Henry. And, you know, again, comes down to the opportunity. He needed a tight end, best available tight end out there on waivers, Hunter Henry.
Yeah, needed an upgrade at tight end. And Hunter Henry was tight end 21 last year. And I mean, when you look at that, and it's super flex. So a lot of teams, a 12-team league, sometimes positions are hard to come by. So grabbing a upgrade anywhere you can. I did it in defense. Justin did it at tight end. A good pick there.
The 10th quarterback off the board came after that. It was Spencer Rattler, and he goes right at the back end of the 5th round. Zach, I think this was a good value pick there because, listen, Spencer Rattler, there's the potential of Carr not making it through the season, a potential contract thing. We sort of saw it last year with Aiden O'Connell, where he kind of got thrusted into the starter's position, the quarterback one. I mean, I love that pick. The back half of the 5th round, take a flyer. And again, it's a guy who slipped in the draft, and we saw a lot about the Netflix documentary. That was sort of what rubbed a lot of teams the wrong way. But the talent is there. And so I like the pick here at the back half of the 5th round.
Yeah, I mean, most people would sit there and say Spencer Rattler was the 10th quarterback off the board in a super flex draft. Kind of crazy that he dropped that far, but definitely a good pick there. And you kind of look for the upside, and you could have an argument that after those top 6 that, I mean, Spencer Rattler could be next after those guys. So, I mean, what a pick there late in the 5th round, and just take a flyer on him and see where it goes.
So the draft rounds out with Bub Means, and then what I think could end up being a pretty big sleeper. It's a guy who went in the second round in last year's rookie waiver draft, Tank Bigsby. And he is Mr. Irrelevant in this league. But I think that the opportunity knocks and Etienne, and we keep hearing the rumblings about, less workload. We heard a lot of rumblings about Tank. I didn't really believe smokescreen. I thought it was a smokescreen. I didn't really believe it. But Tank Bigsby to be able to take a flyer with the very last pick of the draft, why not take the opportunity?
Handcuffs, Brett. Once again, they show here and a great pick with number 60 overall. And you said it, for a guy who went in the second round last year, was sitting on waivers. A really smart pick here to try and just find some upside and take a flyer on a backup running back.
So who in this entire draft, as we now hit the back end of the draft, who, looking at the entirety, do you think really made a difference here with their picks?
There's a couple teams, and I know we've kind of discussed this multiple times. I'm gonna take Doug and Jared because I think their team is now in a spot where, even more than I thought, they're just ready to go. They're ready to look for a championship. They have a stacked roster already, and they built up their picks here in the next couple of drafts, and they really found a lot of value here in the first and second round. I mean, you talk about a quarterback that, in my mind, could be the top guy when we look back at this draft in Jaden Daniels. In terms of fantasy, the rushing value is just massive. And people say, oh, well, he could be Lamar Jackson. He's a better passer in my mind than Lamar. So when you look at that upside that he has heading into the system in Washington, it really could be a great career for Jaden Daniels as long as he stays healthy. But even you look at the next three guys, and Brock Bowers, who I said could have gone a little bit earlier, Trey Benson, who is a very important piece behind James Conner, who's never played a full season in his NFL career, Brett. I mean, there's going to be one game or two games where Trey Benson gets a ton of work in that backfield, even with Tyler back and healthy. And then Jermaine Burton as well, who could have gone in the mid-second round, but a guy that, if T. Higgins is out or says, all right, see you later, they trade him, Jermaine Burton's the next guy up and could have gone earlier in the NFL draft if it wasn't for off-field issues. So definitely some great value picks in the first and second round.
I'm going to say that looking at this draft, listen, it's very easy to say, Jared M., who had a bunch of picks early on, Will, who had a bunch of picks early on, that they would be the winners. And listen, when you get the most impact pieces, it's pretty easy to say that. Same to Jared and Douglas. I think that to have the two of them with a bunch of early picks, like, it just makes sense. And they were able to capitalize on it with a trade for Saquon Barkley. It's those two straight lines that I see. Jared P. and Jack, who didn't trade any of their picks, they sat there and they basically let the talent fall to them. You look at and break down Jared P.'s draft. Xavier Worthy falls to him there, where we kind of thought he might be going the pick before. He gets A.D. Mitchell in the next round, another good receiver. Kamani Vidal, I love that pick. To pick him in towards the mid to back half of the third round. Tyrone Tracy with the opportunity. Sam Hartman as well, running quarterback sitting in front of him. So I love that draft. And then Jack had the same sort of deal. It was like J.J. McCarthy sort of just fell into his lap. Same with Marshawn Lloyd. And so, while I didn't totally agree with the Noah Fant pick, I think he followed it up with two really good handcuffs, two really good opportunities past that in Elijah Mitchell and Tank Bigsby. So them, to me, I think just sticking and, allowing themselves to let the talent fall to them really shine through.
Yeah, 100%, Brett, and kind of letting the guys fall to you. I mean, you turn into a really smart person after the draft with all the guys that we were seeing fall to these two teams who just didn't make any moves, sat where they were, and said, thank you very much, letting those guys fall all the way down to them. Great drafts from both of them.
All right, so now let's enjoy the rest of our league mates who might be tuning into the stream and break down our teams. of how they line up here. So we move it on over here. And Zach, let's just break it down pretty quickly. Obviously, you take a look at your team. We'll start with your team first. You look at the quarterbacks, and now you sort of have a little bit of depth where just a few weeks ago it looked like you were sort of in danger with just Justin Herbert and Justin Fields, who wasn't exactly going to be the starter. You add Aaron Rodgers via trade. You have Michael Penix sitting there as a developmental guy, and you have Jordan Travis sitting as a developmental guy. What is your thought here now as opposed to 2 weeks ago?
I'm very happy now, Brett, as opposed to 2 weeks ago where I thought my team would be down in the dumps for this season. But, I mean, looking at it right now, it's kind of I got my quarterbacks, which was my biggest need. I get Rodgers and then some insurance in Penix. Don't know when he's going to play. It could be in 3 weeks. It could be in 2 years. But I don't know. I'll take the upside that he has in his NFL career. And I think the rest of it was just about grabbing depth. I grabbed a guy at each position. I grabbed a running back. I grabbed a wide receiver. And then I upgraded on defense. I think when looking at that as obviously the two quarterbacks in Penix and Travis, I filled my needs. And while adding depth, and I'm kind of in a spot now where I can look at a lot of the guys on my team and see if I can upgrade two for a star. I think that's the kind of position I'm in right now with my team. I feel like I'm on the brink of the playoffs, but you can never be too sure, especially with so many great teams around us.
Yeah, I think that it's a really competitive, top couple teams there, and that next tier of teams, I would say, of who's fighting to get into those last couple playoff spots, I think sort of has narrowed in the last couple days with this draft. Listen, I think you had a good draft. I think that allowing, obviously, the quarterbacks is gold when it comes to Superflex. But being able to add an addition at wide receiver, Troy Franklin there in the 4th round, great value. Obviously, we talked about that. Jordan Addison, you traded for as well just a few weeks prior to that. And then I think you're pretty good at the Sam Laporta being your tight end 1, Dalton Schultz being your tight end 2. And so you go out, you get a defense, and sort of that's the upgrade. And so I think you're sort of right on us. Breaking down my team pretty quickly, it was Neighbors, McMillan, Theo Johnson, Javon Baker, and Audric Estime. Listen, I was happy with my draft. I think that, my team was sort of in a spot where the quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson, Patrick Mahomes, I didn't need to add another quarterback, so wasn't really looking at all there. I looked at my running back room, and I was like, okay, there might be an opportunity to get another guy in there. Izzy Abanikanda sort of is now the odd man out, we think, in the Jets locker room with the additions of Braylon Allen, with the addition of Isaiah Davis. And so to get Estime there, potential opportunity guy, I felt a little more comfortable there. I really thought that I was going to get more running backs, tight ends, quarterbacks than I was at wide, but the wides just sort of fell, and I had to take the opportunity there. So McMillan and Baker join what is an insane room right now. And Malik Neighbors obviously is right now the rookie headline in that group. And so, I think very strong. We play in a 3 wide receiver league. And so to be able to rotate some of those guys in as your flex position, I think makes it very comfortable. Obviously, Trey McBride had the year that he did. Dallas Goedert right now is the number 2 tight end there. Theo Johnson, I think, has the potential to unseat Goddard eventually as that number 2 tight end. And, obviously the defenses, I still got 3 defenses, and so room to play there. I think that we've sort of broken down our thought process as far as the draft goes, well-rounded as far as our rosters. I think that you and I, obviously we talk about this at length, but opportunity cost and being able to let value come to you and potentially getting guys to flip them later on. And if a guy has an opportunity, becomes a star, you can flip good for great. And so that's sort of what the approach I think always is, especially as you get toward the back half of the drafts.
Yeah, 100%, Brett. And just quickly on that, it's kind of letting the guys fall to you. We talked about that a lot. There was a lot of guys that, especially in both of our later picks, that just fell into our lap, and you kind of take that upside. Guys that could turn into something, and obviously for your team looking for maybe that second running back or a third running back to go with the guys that you have. And I mean, getting some of those wide receivers that could turn into value pieces is huge in maybe a future trade like that. So grabbing the value right there is definitely huge, and we kind of both saw that as this draft went on.
All right, so Zach, it is draft season now for redraft. Next week, we are going to start breaking down some of our redraft tips before we start getting into our rankings, our sleepers, all of that stuff. What are you looking forward to now?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I looked at a lot of drafts and a lot of mocks, and I'm kind of building my strategy of how I'm going to go in. We have two different redraft leagues, you and I. Well, I do, Brett. And I have an early pick in one and a late pick in another. So it's kind of balancing those and seeing who's available. And what I'm on a trend. I'll sneak preview it. I really like the running backs early. So that's how I'm feeling. Just looking at stuff right away. And there's a lot of wide receivers. So I definitely have to be patient when I'm looking at that. So that's kind of just my early thoughts on it after looking at a lot of redraft rankings.
Yeah, I think that using Dynasty and your outlook sort of in Dynasty of some of those sleepers may help a lot with what's going on here in redraft as well. And like you said, there's a ton of wide receivers. We saw it obviously in the back half of this Dynasty draft of potential wides that have the opportunity to make an impact pretty early on in their career. I just talked about like Jalen McMillan, for example, who has the opportunity to get on the field right away. Guys like Keon Coleman, et cetera. And so I think that I agree with you. I think that, to tease it a little bit, you and I talked at length about running back rooms and how there are a lot of them by committee right now. And so to be able to grab a wide, later on and grab the running backs early, I think could be a potential opportunity that we both might end up taking.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it's unbelievable how quickly we've moved now into redraft season. Obviously a full month till the season starts, and a lot of episodes coming up to help our viewers really get set for their redrafts, and should be a fun year, Brett.
Yeah, and obviously right now we're sort of in the nitty-gritty of trying to sort out which clips from training camp mean something and which clips don't mean anything. Obviously now we're going to actually have some preseason games coming up, and we can break down, here's the guys that we think are actually going to be really good this year in redraft, and here's what fact and fiction sort of a thing. Make sure you check out all of our episodes on YouTube, podcast. Give us the thumbs up. In the words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darkest before the dawn. We shall rise yet again. For Zach Malamed, I'm Brett Malamed. We'll catch you next time on the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Catch you on the next one.